Hey everyone, so in the last session, we saw Rabia and Bob introduce declarative agents. And in this session, we're going to talk about extending declarative agents. So we're going to talk about how you can extend declarative agents in two ways. Those ways are skills and knowledge.
Yeah, so you mentioned knowledge and skills. Like, what are these two? Because I can imagine something with it, but I'd like to know for sure.
Okay, so first of all, should we just get into skills? Should we just see it? Like, see it in action, right? Okay, cool. So here I've got our Trade Genie declarative agent. You might have seen this in the previous session. So what we're going to show is how this declarative agent is going to use an API plugin, right? And this is going to be a skill. So suppose you're a project manager at Trade Research, and you want to find a developer quickly with a specific skill. You want to assign them to a project. Okay, you're at Trade Research, and you've got a project management system that holds information about developer skill sets and your project information as well. And you've got an API on that system to interact with that data. So with a API plugin and a declarative agent, we can empower that declarative agent to basically go and get that data or help us update it as well. So let's take a look at our declarative agent, and let's go and find some developers that know TypeScript. So we've got two developers, Avery and Sanjay. So we can see that our plugin has returned information from our project management system. So now we're going to assign Sanjay to our project. So this is how a post can happen. First of all, actually, what it does is it confirms what you want to do first. And actually, we made a mistake. We didn't want 20 hours. We wanted 80 hours for Sanjay on this project. And we posted that, and we got a confirmation back from the API plugin as well to say, hey, yeah, I've gone and done this on your behalf in another system through the declarative agent. So if we move on to what a skill actually does, is that it empowers your declarative agent to act upon a user request. So our project manager put in an action that it wanted the declarative agent to perform. The declarative agent knew that it had an API plugin that could handle that request, and it went and did that for the user just using natural language.
Right. So the interesting part is, right, it looks really, really cool. Like, you can just have a chat in the language you understand, and when that communicate with an external system or an app. Sounds very elaborate. Is that though? Shall we have a look at how it actually works in practice behind the scenes?
Let's go for it.
Perfect. All right. Let's have a look at some code. So this is a code of an agent. If you build one, you know exactly what this is, right? It has a name, description, instructions. So this is really the basic stuff. The plugin, or the interaction part between the agent and the external app through an API, right, comes exactly here as an action, right? So in here, we have a reference that this agent is able to invoke an action. What is an action? In this case, it's an API plugin, right? So an agent can connect to an API. And when you build a plugin, it really isn't that elaborate, right? Because like, what you do is you're actually doing two things. Like, first of all, you define the functions that the action can invoke, right? So, or the agent can invoke. So in this case, it can get consultants. What else it can do? It can get user info. It can do projects. It can get info about project, and so forth and so on. So basically, that way you instruct the agent what are the different operations that this plugin allows it to do. So that is one. Two, another thing you need to do, because like at some point the agent will want to call the API. How does it know how to do that? Well, in here you add a runtime. So for every API you want to call from the agent, you add this part. You say like, hey, this is an open API that like you have the description of it in open API, and you link to a spec. And then you say, for the function that I have in this agent or in the plugin, invoke this API. So this is kind of how you map the functions from here with the definition of the API, because so far you haven't seen a URL, like any URL in here. Where's the URL? You ask, the URL is in the API spec, right? So in here you see a basic open API spec for this API. The interesting part is this token here that allows you to, on the fly, expose the URL of the API you run on your box over internet, so that Copilot and the agents you use can call the API on the local box, which is perfect when you actually build the API as well. And then in here, you have all the paths and operations that this API supports. And then basically with these three things in place, the agent knows how to go all the way from the user's prompt to an API to get the data or post the data and get back a response. So,
Waldek, you've just shown quite a lot of things there, I guess, to really kind of simplify this. So if you have an API in your organization and you have an API spec, you can create an API plugin, right?
Exactly that. So it's really these two elements, API and API spec. There's a little bit of thing you need to add, but it's basically just to explain it to the agent. How does it need to interact with the API?
Yeah, so a rich API spec with really good descriptions is, going to help then declarative agent say, yeah, I've got something that can go get me that information. I'm going to get a response for you. So fantastic. Okay, so we talked about skills, right? And we talked about API plugins. So one thing we mentioned at the beginning was knowledge. So exactly. Let's take a bit of a moment to talk about knowledge. So when we talk about knowledge, it's really kind of providing more information to the declarative agent and the foundational model that the declarative agent uses to provide more context, because it just has its training data, right? And that training data could just be public information, but it's not your business data, right? You want your business data to be reasoned over by that declarative agent. One way that you can extend that knowledge is to use a graph connector. And a graph connector helps you take content and ingest that into Microsoft 365. And because it's part of Microsoft 365, the declarative agent can then reason over that content as well. You can just say, hey, I've got this content here. I want you to use this, right? When you're given an answer. So, should we take a look, see what that looks like?
Definitely. I was just about to ask, let's see it in action, because that's really like the best way to learn things.
Great. So, back to our TradeGenie declarative agent. So in this scenario, we're capturing feedback as our project manager. We're capturing feedback from customers about developers who are working on the projects, and we're going to store those in documents in our project management system. So we want to use that graph connector to take that content in those documents and ingest it into Microsoft 365, and then say to our declarative agent, hey, here's some source of information that I want you to use in your answers. So let's get some feedback for our developers. So we'll find our developers. We'll use the plugin that we've shown before to get our TypeScript experts. And then we're going to check for feedback from clients as well. And what's really cool is that we're able to use both a plugin and data ingested by a graph connector in the same conversation. And we can see that the information that's been returned is it's got citations as well, so we know that it's come from these external documents, and we can see elements of these documents actually in context as well. So it knows, hey, this feedback for Avery, and is able to give that response. So, shall we take a look at the code?
Definitely,
see how this all works?
Like, this looks really, really cool, because you have the ability to provide additional content to the agent, right, coming from an external storage. And it's interesting part, like, how does that end up here? How does that external blob and feedback that we capture and store ends up here in the responses that the agent shows to users? So let's have a look at the code. Cool. We are right back with the agent, right? And when you think about connecting it to a connector, we go to another part in here where we go to connectors. And in here, we have the ability to pass the ID of the connection that we want to use. This part is really it. There is not more to it, right? So when you build an agent and you integrate it with a data source that's coming from a connector, the agent assumes that the connector, that the connection is already there, right? So you don't need to do anything else in the agent. You've done all the hard work inside a connection. How does that look like? Well, if you like the connection and the connectors and connections have been around for a while, right? So that part isn't new. But in case you haven't built one yet, let's have a quick look at what a connection actually is, because it isn't really that hard. In essence, it's 3 calls to Microsoft Graph. That is what a connector is. It's a piece of code that runs 3 calls to Graph and allows you to bring external content from any place you have it stored, whether that's API, database, file system, whatever it is, to Microsoft Graph, so that it's available to things like Microsoft 365 Search, Copilot, and so forth and so on. So again, 3 calls to Microsoft Graph. The first call creates a connection. And the connection in this case is a container into which you upload the content that you ingest from your external source to Microsoft 365. So this is the call you have to do. Like you call the Microsoft Graph and you pass in things like the connection or the connection ID, which is exactly what you use in the agent. You pass the name, description, and you're done. Like that is really it. The other thing is schema, right? So that defines the shape of the data that you want to ingest, and it can be anything you want, right? So again, call number 2 to Microsoft Graph, you create schema, and you define that yourself based on what you need for the content. In this case, we have title, we have abstract, consultant, less modified, and URL, right? So you define that shape. You're building up basically a search index on Microsoft 365. The final part is ingesting the content itself. And the way it works, like if you know that term, ETL, extract, transform, load. So you get the content from the source, you change its shape so that it will match the schema that you have in Microsoft Graph, and you load it to Microsoft Graph. And that load is the 3rd call to Microsoft Graph, which is exactly that. You are uploading, you are adding the items that you want to ingest to Microsoft Graph. This is really it.
Great. So again, it's something simple. It's a simple process. You mentioned there's 3 graph calls, right? You're creating your connection, creating your schema, loading in your data, pretty straightforward. And there's other benefits, right? Above Copilot here and using this content in Declarative Agents, we can use it in Microsoft Search as well. So you get more benefits of doing that. Okay, great. We've talked about skills and we've talked about knowledge. And they both seem similar, right? They're both ways of getting data into the declarative agent to provide extra context, extra information. But there are differences, right? So when would we use one versus the other?
Right. So I think we have seen two examples. Like the first one that we had was you get structured info from a database like that, and you want to get it in real time because the data might change a lot, right? So that is typically a job for a plugin, like real time connection to another app, or you want to update things, right? So you would use it for that. When you deal, on the other hand, with a document, a report, that is a job for a connector, because then you get to benefit from the search index that we have on Microsoft 365. You don't need to build your own search and expose it via an API. You can upload the document to us, to Microsoft 365, and you get to benefit from the search engine that we have on Microsoft 365, not to mention of all the experiences where you will be able to see the content like Microsoft 365 Search, Copilot, and other experiences too.
Great. So yeah, great kind of summary there. So plugins, structured data, graph connectors, unstructured data, as simple as we can make it. So with everything that we've talked about, I guess the benefits of extending a declarative agent with these 2 approaches. What is it? Was it really all about, right?
Right, exactly. Like the thing is, like, if you want to benefit from the declarative agents or from Copilot in the workplace, you should really think about being able to connect the agents to the other app systems that you have in the workplace, because then you will be able to complete your core business work through it, as opposed to still having to use the different disconnected apps, right? So that is really, if you really want a benefit of that, think about, like, give it a thought, how you connect Copilot and agents that you build to your external systems.
Great. Couldn't said it better myself. So with that, everyone, stay tuned to learn more about developing Microsoft 365 Copilot. But first, let's have a doodle break.